Hi everyone, thanks for joining me again for another card tutorial here. I am participating in the Kendra's Card Challenge July Color Inspiration Challenge, and here is the palette of colors. I will link and tag the challenge in my description box below, so you can go check that out yourself as well. I'm going to be using Altenew products for this project, and so based on the colors for the inspiration, I picked out corresponding Altenew colors. This is going to be kind of an extensive video, but I tried to make it as quick as I could, but it is a pretty involved process, so considering, here's the paper that I used. I'm making a 6x6 card, so I needed a 12x12 sheet of cardstock, and I wanted it in light pink just to kind of go along and be a good background for these summery soft colors. And so with a 12x12 piece of cardstock, of course, we're going to be cutting that in half to make our card base. But we are also going to be using the Altenew Mini Delight Granny Square set, stamp and die set. I have not used this yet. I've had it for a few months. I love it. We need some clear embossing powder. Of course, everything else that you need to emboss with. So your favorite inks and your little powder pack. I've got some white cardstock there for making all of the pieces to this project. But I also have a piece of copy paper, and that is what's going to hold our little project together. I'm also going to be using this little potted succulent stamp and die set. I loved the pot. I like to combine all my mini stamps and my mini delights. Altenew has a subscription, a monthly subscription called the Mini Delight, where every month you get a stamp and a corresponding die set. And here's another one of those we're going to be using called Light My World. Just going to be using the stamp set, not the die set that comes with it. All right, so 12x12 cardstock. I don't know how old this cardstock is, so I'm not going to link to it, but basically this is going to give us the base for our quilt square card. And all you have to do is cut your 12x12 in half, of course. This cardstock has a weird texture on the front and the back. So I was just playing with what side I wanted in the card and what side I wanted outside of the card. And of course, just fold it in half, give it a good score. And there you go. It's a lightweight cardstock, but what we add on the front is going to beef it up a little. So basically, because that's a 6x6 card front, the granny square, we're going to be able to get a 6x6 granny square quilt made to put on the front of this card. So I need 3, 6, 9 granny squares. So this Mini Delight Granny Squares is a layering stamp set. It comes with a border for each square and then 3 different layers inside each square, which would be very cool in warm colors or great for a nice winter card or a fall card. But I had envisioned in my head a summery Chanel colored bedspread. And so we're going to be doing Emboss Resist to make our quilt out of these squares, which means there is a lot of embossing with the clear embossing powder. So this is the extensive part. So of course, it's been edited to speed things up for the video, but if you do want to try this technique, just give yourself some extra time and patience. So what I'm going to do is I've got all my little scraps of cardstock. Those are 110-pound Classic Crest Nina Solar White. I save all my scraps, my 110 scraps, to make embellishments for my cards, so this is a perfect use for those. So starting out, starting with the border stamp, I'm going to do that. I'm going to stamp that and emboss that 9 times on my scraps here. I'll show you once. And then shake that off. Now, because you're doing clear embossing powder on a pretty intricate little stamp, you want to just try and look at it really good. See how I move it around there, just to make sure I did get all of the little knitting areas in the stamp design, because it's, you know, supposed to look like a little knitted crocheted. I don't know what Granny makes her squares out of. Crocheted, I guess. Anyways, so you just want to make sure you get all those. If you don't, of course, you can go back and fix them up. Add more embossing powder to them. And of course, you're going to heat set this. Now, my tip for this layering, if you're doing embossing, this much embossing with a layering stamp set, I did the borders first. So I stamped one border, then I stamped another border, then I stamped another border, then I did all 9 borders. Then I went back and I started again from the beginning and I stamped the second layer. And I stamped all 9 of the second layer. Then I went back and did the third, and then I went back and did the fourth, because this is a 4-layer stamp set that I needed to stamp 9 times. Now, with a heat gun, when you start stamping within a stamp and you're embossing each of those stampings, you do run the risk of remelting the embossing powder that has previously been melted. So once you finish the first round of embossing and you go back and you start the second round of embossing the image, the second stamped image layer, just hit it slowly with your heat gun. Don't come at it forcefully or as hardcore as you did the first round, because if you come at each layer as we go inwards to finish each square, you will be reheating the previous embossing that you did. And once you turn off your heat gun, it will be sticky. And if you stick your finger in it, you're going to have a fingerprint in your granny square. So it's okay to do this type of embossing, but after each internal layer that I'm stamping and embossing, I'm going to set it down and let it air dry a little bit before I do the next layer and the next layer. As long as you let them cool down between layers and don't touch it, you'll be fine to get through this without getting a fingerprint in any of your granny squares. So that is my big trick for this, for doing a multiple layered embossing. Just let the layers cool down. So here I am now. I finished all my borders. Now you see me going to the second, which goes inside the first. Each one they go graduated from the outside stamp back inside, inside, and inside. So that's how we build up the knitted look. I'm just showing you how the different layers look. So that's the one that goes on the inside, but I am going to just kind of fast forward after this so that we can get on with the project. You know, sometimes it's good to watch someone else emboss just to see, hey, what do they do? How do they do it? You never know. You might learn something from watching somebody else do it, right? We're never too old or young to learn. Not when it comes to our crafting. But as labor intensive as this embossing project was, it is so worth it. I loved it, and I think I'm going to try this technique again when it comes to fall or winter cards. I can just see this being a nice cozy brown with little cups of cocoa, or little leaves and pumpkins all over the front of the card. So that's what I would do. Anyways, here we go with another little round of stamping and embossing here. So you can see the stamp set up there. I've used the outside layer, I've used the second layer, Now we're going to the third layer, which is going to go inside, obviously, the second layer. And they actually fall into place really well, especially because each layer is embossed. So it kind of creates this little reservoir for the next layer to slide into. So that kind of actually helps. Although this would look very pretty stamped, not just embossed. And I am using the stamp wheel to line up all these layers. But keep an acrylic block handy because the fourth layer inside each granny square is just a little cross section of knitted, knitted look. And you see right there, I used an acrylic block to just dab that right in the middle. So you could use the stamp wheel for that last layer, but it was so small and it's just embossing ink, so it only needs one hit. One smoosh down onto my card. So that would be my tip for you there if you're doing a stamp set that graduates inwards like this. So this is what took the majority of the time, of course, was the embossing. And as you see, right till the very end was when I spilt my embossing powder. So at least I made it through all 9 squares before that happened. And I don't have the fan on, so I don't have to worry about it blowing. So, yep, I wipe off all my stamps, and then I put them back on to their plastic sheet because when you're embossing, that powder, the powder has powder, you know, it's like the powder has its own dust, and regardless, it gets on the back of your stamps, it gets on everything. So what you don't see also is halfway through this embossing process, I took everything away from my desk. I cleaned everything down, cleaned down my stamp wheel, cleaned all my stamps, just wiped them all down, and then I continued stamping and embossing because it was kind of dusty. So now the die set is, of course, a square to cut out our granny squares. So we're going to cut those out, cut out all 9 of those squares. And I think what you could do is, like, if you just used the stamp set as a stamp and stamped your quilt out, you could then stamp special individualized squares of funky colors or something special and then die cut them and place them layered on top of your quilt. So all of the squares are cut out. That's just me testing make sure I don't have a goober in my glue bottle. So I laid down that sheet of copy paper and I'm going to glue each square to that copy paper. And I'm going to set them so that the edge of each square along the edge of the copy paper just goes over the copy paper just a little bit. Because we don't really want to see the copy paper. We're just using it to hold all these squares together. Now you could have embossed all of these squares onto a piece of the 110 cardstock. And instead of doing what I did, which was emboss each one and cut out each square. But for the emboss resist technique, I like how the ink fills in the cut lines between each square. I think it just looks a little more authentic. I don't know, but I like it, so that's what I did. And plus it's fun to use our stuff, right? So get all your little squares on there. And I punched them up as tight as I could, so you definitely want to use liquid glue for this. Now, they are going to kind of like roll a little bit. They're going to, because we glued those down onto that lightweight paper, they're going to kind of roll up. So you might want to, this is me smushing it down. I have a brayer that I use just specifically for smushing glued things down. So you definitely want to smush it, and then you're going to want to put some weight on it. You don't have to wait overnight or anything like that. You just want these to set up so they don't curl. So you can put an acrylic block on it, let it sit up. You'll see me do that in a minute. Or you can stick it under a book overnight, whatever you want. But I got a nice big acrylic block that holds it down just well. And that was really only for like 10 minutes. So just pressing it down. Doesn't it look cool? It looks like it looks like an old farmhouse tin ceiling. That's what I love. And that would be another great use for this out of metallics. Oh, see, there's another idea. A little tin ceiling card. Oh, I would love that. All right, so let's bring in our colors here. Now, I kind of split up the colors. If you saw it on the thumbnail picture, the blanket itself is the warmer colors, and then the embellishment, which is the flower in the pot, those are the cooler colors. So the periwinkle and the lavender field. So I've still got those there just off to the side because now we're gonna get all artistic. All right, so bringing in potted succulent. Again, I'm going to be using my scraps of 110 cardstock. I keep my little envelope full of my 80-pound and 110-pound cardstock scraps right on my work table because that is just, I mean, it's great. Great for cutting out all your embellishments and your sentiments and all that stuff to have them handy. And I was going to use black to stamp the base of the vase here, but I don't like to use black unless I really have to. I like to use colors in all of my stamping. I really, really do. So I've decided that I'm going to use the cool colors to stamp out the pot for the plant. Now I haven't used this set yet either, so I am using the conditioning eraser to run over that stamp set. I recommend doing that because it does help. If you have a new stamp and you put it into your ink and you stamp down, sometimes you get like these little bubbles that form. So I have become addicted to using the stamp conditioning eraser. And now Altenew has some new ones out on their website. So the link to the Altenew shop is in the description box below. You need to check out those erasers. They are so pretty and beautiful. And yes, I want them just to have them. Even though the ones I have work just as fine, of course. But, you know, we all want new things that are pretty. So, stamping that out in this new Fresh Dye Ink Periwinkle. And this was a really juicy cube. But I love the color. I love the color. Here we go, stamp it down. And you see I didn't do the whole thing because I really just want the pot. So I don't need those little leaves and things that are coming out of the top of the pot. I do like to stamp my things twice, so, you know, here we go. I love a good crisp line, especially if it's a focal point on something. Like you want a good crisp line on your vase or your flower pot here, I think. So, of course, wipe that off. Wipe off your stamps before you put them away. There it is. Couldn't find my wiping cloth. Now, I was going to use the matching die to cut that pot out, but I have to custom cut it anyways because I'm going to cut off some of those leaves at the top that came out on the stamp. So I'm just going to fussy cut this little guy. It's super easy. It's really just a cylinder. And that way also, because I am combining it with this flower stamp, I can cut it the way I need it to work with my stamp if I'm fussy cutting it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this vase look like it's see-through. So it's a see-through glass vase in the periwinkle shade. So of course that means you're going to be able to see the stems of the flower arrangement inside of it. So I've placed the flower stamp over the pot, just so that oh my gosh, the stems are just down into the vase. Now, trying to go with an illusion of something being in the water that's in the vase, I chose the lavender field to stamp out these stems because the water kind of changes the color of things, makes them a little lighter. So I thought that was a good touch. Always trying to make things look as realistic as possible, I think. But I love combining all the mini stamps together because they don't just make your card. They actually embellish the card. They are the jewelry of the card, the little mini stamps. Yes, you could do a whole card with stamped images from the mini sets, mini stamps, but I'm a person, I really like to do artsy backgrounds on my cards, mixed medias or artwork like I'm doing with this quilt here. And so I don't want to cover all my artwork with another layer of artwork or something. So I like to use all the little mini stamps to create little stories that just embellish the artwork that I put onto the card. And it's fun to like play with them, play with the little images. So there we go. We got our stems in our flower pot. Now here comes the fussy cutting. Like I said, super easy fussy cut this vase. And trim off the little fronds at the top. Set him aside. Okay, now we're going to do the cool stamping on the flower. And I say it's cool because I love ombre stamping. I love it. I love it. I love it. So what does that mean? Okay, well, get your stamp placed. And ombre, of course, means you're going to use different shades of a color and they're going to blend into each other. So I am going to start with my lightest color in my inspiration here, and for that it is Lemonade Stand, and I am just hitting it around the top tips of all the petals on this flower, trying to keep it around the tips just as much as I can. Now it's going to obviously not be perfect, but that's the whole point of ombre ink blending, is that it blends itself in with the next color you put down. So if you slip up, it's not a problem. So coming in with Amber Blaze, now I'm going to work my way down the flower. So underneath where I did the petals, I'm going to stamp all the rest of the flower in the orange. I love the little handy tool here. I forget what it's called and where I got it from, but I love my little thingy. So you see how we're getting that gradation effect of color. And now I am bringing in the lavender field. And yes, okay, you're like, well, leaves aren't purple. Well, guess what? They are today. They're purple today, and where they where the purple butts up to that orange is going to create kind of a green anyways. And I just think it's really cool. It's very artsy, so I love it. And I love doing this type of stamping. Of course, put all your stamps away so you don't lose them. Now, the die set that came with this stamp set was a light bulb. And so obviously I need to cut this flower out. So you're right, you guessed right, we're fussy cutting. Fussy cutting this flower. Now don't worry, I will speed this up for people that can't handle watching the pain of fuzzy cutting, because it is painful to watch. But there we go. All right, so I'm removing all the little debris off my craft mat, because now we're going to color the quilt. Playing with my little pieces. I love playing with my little pieces. You know why? Because I like miniatures, doll houses and miniatures. I do have a couple doll houses, and I love miniatures. And I think to me, playing with all these little embellishments with the mini delights and all the little things, making little stories with them, kind of makes me, kind of reminds me of working with my miniatures. So fun. All right, so now we are going to blend all the inks into another ombre look here. I'm starting with a very light hand. I believe that is with the Dusty Pink. So if you're not familiar with doing a Emboss Resist technique, you want to start light, because the ink is going to fill in the places in between all of your embossing. So always start light. So now I can come, say I started light, now I can come back and make it a little heavier. And I don't know why I started with the pink. I just started with the pink. But because I'm doing another ombre, you know, if that's what you're doing with this technique as well, then just decide which angle you want to go with. I'm starting with my darker colors down here at this corner. And I'm going to go light up into the opposite corner. So I think this is the orange I brought in. I, of course, couldn't see it there. Yep, that would be the Amber Blaze coming in. So you see how I have space between the orange and the pink that I laid down? The trick to blending is it's a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth technique. That's how you get a very smooth, easy to live with blending. So when you start putting colors down to do this type of effect, put your colors down and leave a little bit of white space in between each one, because after you get all your colors in place, then you're going to go back and start blending one color over the other over that white space in between there. That's the trick to getting a really smooth, even blended look. And there goes Lemonade Stand up in the corner. I really love that color. I am not a yellow person, but I don't know. Nothing screams a Chanel bedspread to me more than this yellow color, and I don't know why. All right, so we've got our little areas of color placed in. Now I can go back and blend these together. So coming back in with my pink, and I'm going to push that into the orange and backwards into the darker pink. And you just do this back and forth, one color over the next, and then back onto itself and back and forth until you get a good blend that you like. Now, because we're doing this over clear embossing powder that's been embossed, it's a very slippery surface. So you're going to notice a lot more slippage with your blending tools. And that's okay. Just keep working it. It's just something to get used to. It's a different feel than doing this kind of blending on cardstock. So even maybe practice doing this before you do like a whole project in it. Although these squares and this technique would be amazing as a scrapbook page layout. I do love scrapbooking. You don't see me do much of it, but don't worry, that's coming. That's coming. Give me time. I'm getting there. Yeah, so just keep playing with it, back and forth, back and forth. Now, like I said, the ink is going to fall onto the cardstock in between all the embossed areas. So right now you see all this color, but remember, this is a slippery surface. All this ink is sitting on top of all of that embossing. So once you get a blend the way you like it, of course you got to cover all your inks. Cover your inks so you don't stick your thumb in it. So the ink is just sitting there on top of that embossing. So you can take a cloth, you can take a paper towel, nothing wet, just something dry, and then just wipe all of that extra ink right off the top. And that gives you your little woven look. Look at that. Isn't it cute? I think it's super cute. I love Emboss Resist because especially if you're a person who likes mixed media or doing really artsy backgrounds, Emboss Resist is an awesome technique. So I'm cutting it out, cutting off the extra copy paper. I'm trying to cut as close to the squares as I can, but I don't want to damage the edges because I like the way that I have the ink, of course, on the edges. That was the whole point of doing this long, drawn-out process, was to have those nice inked edges of the quilt. And you can't really cut that close up into the squares without damaging the squares. So I am going to use my craft knife to just sweeten up the edges that I was not able to cut too close with my scissors. It really wasn't that bad. I got pretty close, actually, with scissors. I was impressed. And when you're doing this, you want a very sharp craft knife. You don't want to rip and rip and rip. It's so fun. This is just such a fun piece. Now you can decide, look at how it moves. I love it. Now you can decide which way you want to put it on the card front. So let's bring the card base in here. Make sure it's opening the way you want it to open. Now that panel there that you see me playing with right there, I omitted it from the beginning of the video just to save time. Because I thought when I put my quilt on, that embossed textured layer would stick out around the edges and look kind of cool, like extra bit of blanket. But turns out once I put it onto the card, the quilt covered it all up anyways. So it's not relevant to this project at all, but I left it here so you could say, okay, well, that's the organic linen embossing 3D embossing folder. But if you like that look, and if you wanted to leave extra texture around the edge of your quilt, then you could just make your quilt smaller. And then you would have that layer come out. But see, the quilt I made covered the entire thing. So that's just an option to think about, is what could you do to add trim or extra fringe or something, a look of that to your quilt. And it would be, you know, use a weaved or this linen embossing folder, and then just make your quilt smaller so that you can see that texture around it. But it sticks down just nice and straight. Squish out the glue. Now, because we had it open, and this is not the best cardstock I used for the base, I got to recrease. Recrease. There we go. Now we get to play with the embellishments, the little miniatures. I love them. So I'm going to fuss with this little flower in his pot, right? We gotta give him some attention. Trimming out some of the extra greenery there. You could leave it. I could have left all of it. You know, I could have just kept the greenery that came with it and considered it extra greenery in the pot, which would have been perfectly fine. But I'd already committed to just doing a couple little cottagey flowers. You know, a little boho look. Just some, like you walked out in Grandma's front yard in her country house and picked some weeds from the ditch and brought them in, you know what I mean? So I don't know, I wanted it more simple. Now we got to give some shading to our vase to make it look a little more realistic. And I'm using the same color that I stamped the shape of it in. I'm using the periwinkle, and you see I dabbed off my my blending brush on the inside cap of the ink, the inside lid of the ink there. That's just handy because I got rid of my craft mat, so I couldn't wipe extra ink off on that, so I just use the inside lid of the ink holder. And just enough glue to stick the flowers into the pot. And when I say into, obviously just means on. But don't worry, we're going to make it look like they're inside that pot or vase. So there we go with that. We're getting there. This is where I love fussing with the little miniatures. Now I can make it look all realistic here. So I'm going to bring in one of the purple artist alcohol markers, and I'm going to give it some shadowing because I wanted this to be a clear glass vase. So I continued the vase line around over the front of the stems, so it looks like that flower is inside the vase. And you can't see it on film here, but I did bring out my white jelly pen to give a little bit of light reflection on the opposite side of the shadowing from the vase. That's just me being fussy because it's fun. And of course, got to have our sentiment coming up here. So first I wanted to add a little bit more shadow. Just a little more shadow. So more shadow in a small space means use a smaller brush. If you're wondering what's the secret, right, to a lot of these precise images and card things and embellishments that you see everybody making, you have to have the right tool for the right job. And having a small blending brush to get in and add just a little more shadow makes that vase pop, makes it look realistic. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if all I had was my bigger blending brushes I was using before. So, and then of course I decided, well, you know what? Go big or go home. So I'm going to keep fussy cutting the little white insides out of the flower. It's not that bad. This was a pretty easy shape to fussy cut. I am not opposed to fussy cutting. That's how I was raised. Right? Pre-Cricut era, pre-die cut machine era. Yep. And yeah, and of course for the really parts that are in there, you got to bring out your craft knife. Again, if you're going to be doing fussy cutting like this, you want a very sharp craft knife. But overall, like I said, this was not a bad image to fussy cut. There we go. A little bit more. The anticipation, right? The anticipation. Will she chop off the bloom? Heck no. Nope. We're good. We're good. There is our little cottage flower in our periwinkle vase. And this is what I mean with the mini stamp sets. You can have this huge, gorgeous, beautiful background. But if you kept adding more big, gorgeous, beautiful things to it, it would just kill it. It would take away from all that coolness that you just put into that background. But if you put all of that fussy time and energy into your mini little embellishment cluster that you used with your mini stamps, that just sets off the whole project. I think that's what makes it work. It's like an opposites, right? It's a yin-yang thing. A nice, pretty background, but keep it simple, and then put all your fussiness and extra bits into your little embellishment you made with the minis. And I like it offset. I just thought that was cute that the purple was offset there. Looked good on the colors. All right, now we can do the sentiment. And again, I love making clusters with my mini embellishments. So I am going to use the sentiment that comes with the Granny Square set, and it has a die to cut the word out. Another scrap of my 110 cardstock there. And I use that sentiment because it has the die to cut it out with, because I wanted to layer it on top of my flower pot so I could kind of cluster all of the fun elements together in that corner. I thought it would look weird if I just put that sentiment anywhere else on the card. And plus, you can't stamp directly onto this emboss resist technique because it's lumpy. So, you want to think about these things as you finish or plan out your card projects, is that, yeah, you really can't stamp words on top of emboss resist. So, unless that's the look you want to go for, which I'm sure it's fine. But, and again, I haven't used this one yet either, so I had to condition that. I haven't used a lot of my stuff. That's why I'm so excited for finally getting going on my YouTube channel here, so I can finally use all the cool stuff I've been collecting. And I love this periwinkle color. Oh my goodness. I don't like purples either. But periwinkle is not purple, and it's not blue. It's like cornflower. Cornflower is blue, but the color is purple. And so like periwinkle is like that. So I don't know. I just love it because it can go in whichever way it wants to go. I don't even think I had to stamp that one twice because it was so juicy. That's a brand new little ink pad. Love it. All right. Let's cut this bad boy out. I do trim everything so that it fits in on my little plates here for my embossing. I do love good die cut sentiment. Boy, does that make life easy. Ugh. I'm so glad somebody invented dies and die cutting machines for crafting. And of course, where would we be without our tweezers? Oh my goodness. And so there we go. I'm going to layer it right on top of the flower because if I put it anywhere else, it just looked weird. And I really just wanted to keep all the fun stuff all in one spot. So you can see I'm like, here, there, meh. Nope, I'm going to put it right on top of the flower pot. That's unique. And when all else fails, don't go with what's popular, go with what's unique. I think it looks cool like that. All right, there we go. Let's clean up our little bits. That is the project for today. Emboss Resist Granny Quilt Blanket Card. Thank you for spending time with me today, and I can't wait to bring you another video project, so stay tuned. If you liked this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more, and also please share with your friends. Thanks. Bye-bye.